Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into one of the most enchanting and complex figures in history, Cleopatra. Imagine the heat of ancient Alexandria, where golden sunlight shimmers across the Mediterranean waters and the scent of exotic spices fills the air. Cleopatra, a woman of both immense beauty and razor-sharp intellect, navigates the tangled political and cultural landscape of her time, leaving an indelible mark on the world stage. You're about to step into her world, one where power, seduction, and strategy mix in ways that make even the most experienced rulers sweat. Cleopatra's story isn't just about royal bloodlines or a beautiful queen. It's about a woman who used every tool at her disposal to secure her legacy. But remember, you probably won't survive this. Why? Because playing the game of power with Roman emperors and their massive egos? Yeah, that's a dangerous game. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, feel free to post your location and the time where you are right now. Let's see how far Cleopatra's story reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Cleopatra, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, was born around 69 BC, under a dynasty that had roots reaching back to one of Alexander the Great's generals. But she wasn't just another royal figurehead. Cleopatra was smart, cunning, and as politically astute as anyone in the Game of Thrones. She was a master at combining intellect, charm, and sheer nerve to climb the ranks of power. She's often remembered for her beauty, but don't let that fool you. Cleopatra knew exactly what made men, and the world, tick. She wasn't just playing the role of the seductress. She was playing the role of the politician and strategist, often making choices that stunned even her closest allies. Let's start where it all began, in Alexandria. The city was a cosmopolitan hub of learning, art, and commerce, a melting pot of Egyptian, Greek, and Jewish cultures. Cleopatra was born into a world brimming with opportunity and danger. The Ptolemaic dynasty, while powerful, wasn't exactly known for its stability. Family members had a tendency to backstab one another, vying for the throne with a passion that would make modern politicians blush. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy the Stone, ruled Egypt, but his reign was fraught with trouble. His mismanagement and failure to effectively deal with Roman interests had led to Egypt's financial ruin. When Ptolemy XIII died in 51 BC, Cleopatra was thrust into power at the age of just 18, alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy III. But Egypt's throne wasn't a seat you could share forever. Here's where the fun begins. Cleopatra had to outsmart not just her brother, but also the growing influence of Rome. Egypt, rich in resources and strategically positioned, had been under Rome's thumb for years. You see, Rome wasn't just some far-off empire to Cleopatra. They were a looming presence in her daily life. Rome had a hand in Egypt's finances, and for years, it was playing Egypt's political puppeteer. But Cleopatra, savvy as ever, knew that to protect Egypt and preserve her dynasty, she needed an ally who could match her ambition. Enter Julius Caesar. Now remember, Julius Caesar wasn't just the general who crossed the Rubicon and made himself the most powerful man in Rome. He was a man who understood the value of alliances, especially ones that brought in more than just military might. Cleopatra, understanding this, saw the opportunity to secure her rule, not just in Egypt but on the world stage. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's first meeting with picture this. Cleopatra, knowing she had to make an impression, sneaks into Caesar's camp in a rolled-up carpet. Not your average political move, right? You can almost hear the tension in the air as Caesar unrolls the carpet and finds the woman who would become both his lover and political partner. This moment, for many, is the beginning of a relationship that would define Cleopatra's legacy, though it's far more complex than just a love story. Caesar, a man who prided himself on his conquests, wasn't just smitten by Cleopatra's beauty, though that certainly didn't hurt. He saw an opportunity in Egypt's troubled leadership. With Cleopatra on the throne, he would have a firm ally in one of Rome's most strategically vital regions. And Cleopatra, knowing she needed Rome's backing to stay in power, was more than willing to entertain the offer. In fact, it wasn't just an affair of the heart, it was an affair of state. While their relationship flourished, both politically and romantically, Rome back home wasn't as keen on the idea of their general cozying up with an Egyptian queen. Tensions ran high, and Caesar's enemies saw Cleopatra as a dangerous distraction. But Caesar, ever the master of balancing power and intrigue, couldn't let go of his Egyptian connection. The Senate, furious with his actions, eventually assassinated him. But before his death, Caesar had already secured Cleopatra's place on Egypt's throne, having her crowned as the sole ruler of Egypt alongside her younger brother, who was now powerless. But Cleopatra's journey was far from over. After Caesar's death, she faced not only political turmoil within Egypt but also the looming threat of her rivals in Rome. She needed another powerful Roman ally, and who better than Mark Antony? Enter the next chapter of Cleopatra's life, one of high drama and high stakes. Stay tuned, because things are about to get even more interesting. As Cleopatra's life began to pivot from one Roman relationship to the next, the world watched with bated breath. The death of Julius Caesar in 44 BC created a vacuum of power, not just in Rome, but also in the ancient world. With Caesar gone, Cleopatra's position was now even more precarious. The empire that had been her strongest ally was in turmoil. Rome was dividing into factions, and Cleopatra had no choice but to tread carefully. But what did she do? She wasted no time. While Rome argued among itself, Cleopatra focused on solidifying her rule in Egypt. She was, after all, not just a queen. She was a strategic genius, and this moment was no different. She needed a new protector, and one of the most powerful men in Rome, Mark Antony, was ripe for the picking. Mark Antony was a man of ambition. He was a general, a politician, and most importantly, a figure deeply entwined with the future of Rome. At first, his arrival in Alexandria in 41 BC seemed like just another Roman diplomat, visiting an allied ruler. But as soon as he met Cleopatra, the alliance would deepen into something far more profound. Historians still argue about the nature of their relationship. Was it genuine love, or was it merely another political alliance? Given Cleopatra's track record, it's safe to say it was a little of both. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, knew she could use Antony to solidify her place, and Antony, for his part, was drawn to Cleopatra's intellect and ability to maintain power in the face of so much opposition. Yet unlike her relationship with Julius Caesar, where the romance and politics were often more transparent, with Antony, Cleopatra would find herself embroiled in a much more complex and personal bond. Their relationship, which quickly became legendary, wasn't just about wine and roses. Oh no, it was about politics, power, and empire. For Cleopatra, she found in Antony not only an ally, but a man who could offer her protection, even from Rome's inner circle. Their affair would lead to them having children together, twins, Alexander Halio and Cleopatra Selene II, who would play their own roles in Egypt's history, though they were largely overshadowed by their parents' fame. The optics of this relationship were undeniable. Mark Antony, a Roman leader of great standing, had openly aligned himself with an Egyptian queen. Rome's elite were horrified, and this connection would set off a chain of events that would reshape the political landscape of the time. It's said that Cleopatra, with her sharp wit and undeniable charisma, managed to seduce Antony in a way no Roman woman ever could. She had, after all, already proven that she was not a mere pawn in the political chessboard, but a force to be reckoned with. But it wasn't all about romance and children. Cleopatra was careful to ensure that Antony's political power was bolstered in Egypt. She wasn't merely playing at being a queen. She was playing at being a ruler of an empire in her own right, forging alliances with one of the most powerful men in the known world. Through Antony, Cleopatra was able to secure resources, military support, and strategic advantage. And what did Antony get in return? His alliance with Cleopatra brought him Egypt, the richest land in the ancient world. He could now claim the wealth of Egypt's grain stores, access to her strategic ports, and her naval forces, crucial for any Roman general with aspirations of power. Yet, while Cleopatra and Antony's relationship blossomed, Rome's internal conflicts grew. Back in Rome, another powerful figure, Octavian, soon to be Augustus, was steadily building his own base of support, positioning himself as the successor to Caesar's legacy. Unlike Antony, who was consumed by his Egyptian alliance, Octavian remained firmly focused on Rome's future. The stage was set for an epic showdown. The Senate in Rome, led by Octavian, began to turn its attention to Antony, whom they accused of abandoning his Roman duties in favor of a foreign queen. Antony, in turn, lashed out, declaring that Octavian's manipulation of public sentiment was politically motivated. The tension between these two figures would ultimately culminate in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, a battle that would change everything for Cleopatra, Antony, and Egypt. Now let's talk about Actium. If history had a cliffhanger, this would be it. The Battle of Actium was no mere naval confrontation. It was a showdown between two titans of Rome, and the fate of Cleopatra and Antony hung in the balance. As the battle raged, Cleopatra and Antony's forces were decisively defeated by Octavian's fleet. Historians still argue whether the battle was lost due to Antony's overconfidence, Cleopatra's strategic missteps, or sheer bad luck. What is clear, however, is that the aftermath was devastating. The battle marked the end of Cleopatra and Antony's ambitions, and with it, the fall of Egypt's independence. While Cleopatra and Antony fled the battlefield, their fate was sealed. The once thriving partnership between Cleopatra and Antony came crashing down. And, as so often happens in history, it wasn't just the loss of the battle that sealed their fate, but the sheer political weight of their defeat. As Cleopatra and Antony returned to Alexandria, they knew that their reign had come to an end. Rome's forces, now under the full control of Octavian, were closing in. The final chapter of Cleopatra's life was about to begin, one marked by both triumph and tragedy. As Cleopatra and Antony retreated to Alexandria, the writing was already on the wall. The Battle of Actium had ended in disastrous defeat, and their combined forces, once formidable, were now scattered and helpless. The inevitable had arrived. The queen who once dazzled Caesar and seduced Antony with her charm now faced the crushing reality of Roman retribution. In the wake of their defeat, Cleopatra's world began to unravel. It wasn't just the loss of Egypt's military strength, though that was significant. It was the collapse of her carefully constructed alliances, both personal and political. Despite her earlier successes in weaving together a web of support through strategic romantic entanglements, the shifting tides of Roman power were beyond even her considerable talents to control. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra, knowing that defeat was imminent, contemplated a final diplomatic solution with Octavian, or whether she simply fell into despair. What we do know is that her final moments were marked by both defiance and an unflinching desire to maintain Egypt's dignity, even as it slipped through her fingers. As Octavian's legions marched toward Alexandria, Cleopatra knew she would not live to see her kingdom rise again under her rule. The thought of being paraded through the streets of Rome as a captive, a humiliating display for all to witness, was more than she could bear. For a woman who had once commanded the attention of the world, it seemed an unbearable fate. It was during this fateful period that Cleopatra's story took yet another unexpected turn. The details of her death remain a topic of debate among historians. Some suggest that she and Antony, faced with imminent capture, chose to take their own lives together, their final act of defiance. Others speculate that Cleopatra, determined to maintain some semblance of control over her destiny, arranged her death alone, possibly even through the bite of a venomous asp. The ancient accounts vary, and the mystery of her death only deepens her allure. What is certain, however, is that Cleopatra's final moments were dramatic, fitting for a woman who had lived her life at the center of history. When Octavian's emissaries arrived at her palace, they found her dead, along with Antony, who had succumbed to his own wounds earlier. The duo's tragic end mirrored the fall of the empire they had once dreamed of building, a final statement that, while they had lost the battle, they would not go quietly into history's shadows. Cleopatra's death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the end of an independent Egypt. The last active ruler of Egypt had died, and the country was now firmly under Roman control. Egypt, once a land of tremendous power and wealth, would never be the same. Octavian wasted no time in asserting his dominance over the region, annexing Egypt as a province and securing Rome's dominance in the eastern Mediterranean. But even in death, Cleopatra remained a figure of immense fascination. Her legacy continued to captivate the imagination of both Romans and Egyptians, her story forever woven into the fabric of world history. In Rome, Cleopatra was seen as a dangerous, foreign queen who had nearly toppled their great empire with her charm and wit. Yet for the people of Egypt, Cleopatra would always be remembered as a ruler who fought valiantly to protect her kingdom and preserve its dignity, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Her life, filled with romance, political intrigue, and unrelenting ambition, left a legacy that has endured for over 2,000 years. Cleopatra was not merely a woman who relied on beauty to get ahead. She was a ruler who understood the complex interplay of power and persuasion, and she played the game as well as anyone in history. Even centuries later, her life continued to inspire countless works of art, literature, and film. Her name has become synonymous with beauty, seduction, and the kind of power that can shape the world. The Egyptian queen with the Roman lovers was immortalized in the minds of generations, her story etched into the annals of history. But let's not forget one important thing about Cleopatra. She was also a brilliant and capable ruler, managing the affairs of Egypt in a time when women were often sidelined in matters of state. She was a leader who understood the value of alliances and knew when to make bold, decisive moves. Whether it was with Julius Caesar or Mark Antony, Cleopatra's relationships were never just about love. They were about survival, power, and her unwavering determination to secure Egypt's place on the world stage. Despite her tragic end, Cleopatra's legacy would not fade into obscurity. The romance and drama of her life would continue to echo throughout history, immortalizing her as one of the most captivating figures the world has ever known. But Cleopatra was not the only person who shaped her destiny. The powerful men she aligned herself with, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, also left their marks on history, and their influence on Cleopatra's reign can still be felt today. It's fascinating how her relationships with these men, often viewed through a romantic lens, were in fact political power plays that secured her place in history. Historians still debate the nature of Cleopatra's relationships with these men. Was it all love and passion, or was it a calculated political move, where Cleopatra played the role of the seductress to gain power? Some argue that Cleopatra, rather than being a mere pawn in the hands of powerful men, was the one pulling the strings. After all, it was she who chose her partners, not the other way around. It's clear that Cleopatra used her relationships strategically, using her charm and intellect to gain the political advantage she needed. As we reflect on Cleopatra's life and death, we must also consider the impact she had on the world. Her story remains one of the most compelling in history, and her life continues to intrigue us. From her ambitious rise to power to her tragic end, Cleopatra's legacy will always be one of power, seduction, and political genius. She may have fallen, but she certainly left her mark on history, and that is something no one can ever erase. The story of Cleopatra does not end with her death. While she may have fallen in the eyes of her contemporaries, her legacy transcends the sands of time. Cleopatra's life remains one of the most enduring tales in history, with each new generation fascinated by her complex persona, her relationships, and her attempts to secure Egypt's survival in the face of an increasingly dominant Roman Empire. After Cleopatra's death, Egypt was no longer the great independent kingdom it once was. Instead, it became a Roman province. Octavian, soon to be Augustus, wasted no time in consolidating his control over the region, ensuring that Cleopatra's kingdom was absorbed into the Roman fold. But even as Egypt became a province of Rome, Cleopatra's impact continued to reverberate throughout history. She was no longer just the queen of Egypt. She had become a symbol, a representation of both the power and fragility of the ancient world. In the centuries following her death, Cleopatra's image would be distorted and mythologized in countless ways. Ancient Roman writers and poets, particularly those who aligned with Augustus, painted her as a seductress, a foreign queen who had used her allure to manipulate two of Rome's greatest generals. This portrayal, though, does not do justice to Cleopatra's true nature. She was far more than just a pretty face. She was a queen who understood the intricacies of power, the importance of alliances, and the ruthlessness of politics. Cleopatra was a woman who, by all accounts, was a brilliant and capable ruler in her own right. In the wake of her death, the first thing that people wanted to know about Cleopatra was her relationship with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. These Roman giants seemed to define her in the popular imagination, and their personal connections to her became the focal point of her story. But to reduce Cleopatra to simply a lover of great men would be to ignore the incredible complexity of her life. Her relationship with Julius Caesar, while indeed romantic, was also deeply political. Through her liaison with Caesar, Cleopatra was able to solidify her position on the throne, and her son, Caesarion, was born as a result of their affair. This connection to Caesar would later be seen as a source of her legitimacy, although Caesar's assassination in 44 BC would throw her plans into disarray. With the arrival of Mark Antony, Cleopatra again found herself involved in a power struggle, but this time, her personal connection to Antony was even more entangled with her political ambitions. Their relationship was not just about love, but about survival and the continuation of Egyptian sovereignty. The birth of their children, Alexander Halio and Cleopatra Selene, marked their union as a political and dynastic alliance. Yet, despite the deep personal ties, historians still debate whether Cleopatra was ever truly in love with either Caesar or Antony, or if her relationships were simply the means to an end. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Cleopatra was a woman who understood the fleeting nature of power and the necessity of making difficult decisions in the pursuit of securing her future. In both Caesar and Antony, she saw the chance to protect Egypt from Roman annexation, to keep her dynasty intact, and perhaps most importantly, to preserve the autonomy of Egypt itself. While her relationships with these men may have consumed much of the popular narrative, there is so much more to Cleopatra's story. She was a political strategist, a capable ruler who wielded power not just through her alliances with Roman generals, but also through her cunning and intellect. Cleopatra was one of the last monarchs to rule Egypt with full authority, and her reign saw many innovations in Egypt's governance. Her administrative skills, her ability to navigate the complex political landscapes of both Rome and Egypt, and her economic policies helped maintain Egypt's position as a major power in the Mediterranean world for a time. Cleopatra's interactions with Rome were not limited to her relationships with Caesar and Antony. In fact, her reign witnessed a series of diplomatic efforts to safeguard Egypt's independence. Cleopatra often used her influence to negotiate with Roman officials, offering military support and alliances in exchange for Egypt's autonomy. She understood the importance of Rome, but she also knew that Egypt could not survive as a client state forever. Despite her diplomatic acumen and strategic alliances, Cleopatra could not escape the looming power of Rome. When Octavian emerged as the supreme ruler of Rome, Cleopatra's fate was sealed. The Battle of Actium, in which Cleopatra and Antony's forces were decisively defeated, was the final blow for her reign. After their defeat, the world that Cleopatra had fought to preserve was gone. Rome's domination of Egypt was inevitable, yet, even in defeat, Cleopatra's ability to maintain her dignity and control over her destiny was remarkable. Rather than be paraded in chains through the streets of Rome, she chose to end her life on her own terms. Whether by snakebite or poison, Cleopatra's death marked the end of an era. The Ptolemaic dynasty that had ruled Egypt for centuries was no more. But Cleopatra's spirit would endure in the collective imagination of history. The myths surrounding Cleopatra's death are just as fascinating as the rest of her life. Ancient sources provide different accounts of her final moments, with the most famous story being that she died by the bite of a venomous asp, a symbol of both her cunning and her defiance. However, historians debate whether this story is true, or whether Cleopatra chose another method to end her life. Regardless of how she died, her death symbolized the fall of an entire civilization, a civilization that had once been the envy of the ancient world. Though Cleopatra's physical reign came to an end, her legacy lived on. The way she is remembered has changed over time, and she has been both vilified and romanticized in equal measure. Today, Cleopatra is often seen as a symbol of power, beauty, and intelligence, traits that have made her a figure of fascination for thousands of years. Her story continues to inspire, from literature to film to art, and her name remains synonymous with the idea of a woman who used her charm and intellect to conquer the world. Her ability to command the hearts and minds of two of Rome's greatest generals is a testament to her personal magnetism and political skill. But Cleopatra was more than just a lover. She was a ruler who understood the intricacies of power, the fragility of alliances, and the cost of survival in a world that was constantly shifting. And despite the challenges she faced, she always managed to make sure her legacy remained intact. Cleopatra may have been the last queen of Egypt, but she will always be remembered as one of history's most iconic and powerful women. Cleopatra's death marked the end of Egypt's sovereignty and the beginning of a new era in which the once great civilization was absorbed into the Roman Empire. But the story of Cleopatra did not vanish with her passing. In fact, her death may have signaled the end of an era, but her influence continued to reverberate across history. The myths, the stories, and the romanticized versions of her life would continue to captivate minds for centuries, long after the sands of time had swallowed the Ptolemaic dynasty. Cleopatra's death, though tragic, did not erase her legacy. Quite the opposite. It cemented her as one of the most fascinating figures of the ancient world. While she may have been defeated in battle, Cleopatra was never fully conquered by history. She left behind a mythology so potent that it continues to influence how we think about power, beauty, and intelligence to this day. Even in her death, Cleopatra's story continued to be one of survival, seduction, and political brilliance. Her name became synonymous with power and charm, an enduring symbol of female influence. From the ancient world to the modern day, Cleopatra has been remembered not just for her relationships with the men who helped shape her destiny, but for her own unyielding agency in a world where women were often relegated to the background. Cleopatra wielded power like few others, and she did so not by force, but through intellect, strategy, and sheer willpower. Even as Rome absorbed Egypt into its vast empire, Cleopatra's influence did not fade. Octavian's victory over her, and Antony left him with a vast empire, but also a woman whose name was whispered on the lips of both Romans and Egyptians alike. Her story, more than any other figure in history, was one of contradictions. A powerful ruler who was often painted as a seductress, a cunning politician who was seen as nothing more than a romantic figure. Yet history itself could not escape the complexities of Cleopatra's life. She was both victim and victor, lover and ruler, capable of shifting the course of history with a single alliance. Her place in the collective memory of history was complicated by the rise of Augustus. The victor of Actium, Augustus, would go on to be remembered as one of Rome's greatest emperors, but he also had to contend with the enduring fascination with Cleopatra. The Egyptian queen, even in death, was a symbol of everything that Augustus was not: charming, political, and supremely clever. Augustus's propaganda machine worked tirelessly to depict Cleopatra as a villain, a temptress who had nearly destroyed Rome. This narrative was not just about Cleopatra's romantic entanglements. It was about the challenge she posed to the very foundation of Roman power. The Romans, and particularly Augustus, feared Cleopatra's ability to sway men and politics alike. His campaign to discredit her was more than just a personal vendetta. It was about ensuring that the Roman populace did not romanticize her, did not see her as a woman of power in her own right. Augustus knew that Cleopatra's legacy was a threat to his own. But despite all of his efforts to undermine her, Cleopatra remained a force that could not be ignored. While the Roman narrative painted Cleopatra as an evil seductress, the Egyptian people saw her differently. In their eyes, she was a queen who fought valiantly for Egypt's independence. She had ruled with wisdom, with dignity, and with a clear focus on preserving her people's autonomy. Cleopatra's ability to hold her kingdom together, even in the face of the greatest empire the world had ever known, was nothing short of extraordinary. She was not merely a puppet to be pulled by the strings of Roman leaders. She was a queen who took charge of her own destiny. Her image as a powerful and intelligent ruler would only continue to grow with time. Writers and poets, over centuries, would immortalize her not just as a lover, but as a ruler. From the Renaissance to the modern era, Cleopatra's figure was reimagined in countless ways. Her beauty became legendary, but it was her intelligence, her political acumen, and her unrelenting drive for power that remained at the heart of her legacy. The myths of Cleopatra have been recast, reinterpreted, and reborn countless times throughout history. In the 20th century, films such as the 1963 epic Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, turned her into a cinematic icon. In these portrayals, Cleopatra's political shrewdness often took a backseat to her beauty, but her intelligence, ambition, and complexity were still central to the narrative. Even today, Cleopatra is a figure who represents a different kind of power, a power that is not just about brute force or military might, but about intellect, charm, and persuasion. Her life and legacy continue to offer lessons for women in power, showing that intelligence and strategy can be just as important as physical strength when it comes to wielding influence. Her historical significance was not just in the alliances she forged, but in the way she navigated the treacherous waters of ancient politics. Her life was a balancing act between ambition and survival, between love and strategy. Cleopatra understood the need for power, and she was willing to make any sacrifice, including her personal life, in order to protect Egypt and its people. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were not merely romantic. They were political moves, carefully calculated to secure her position and her people's future. Cleopatra's impact extends far beyond her time. Her story is a reminder that, in the world of politics, even the most powerful figures must carefully navigate relationships and power dynamics. Her life challenges us to think about the ways in which women in history have been portrayed, and to question how their stories are told. Cleopatra was far more than just a lover of great men. She was a queen who understood the complexities of ruling, the intricacies of power, and the sacrifices that must be made to protect what is most Important. Cleopatra's legacy, so deeply entwined with both ancient Egypt and the Roman Empire, continued to evolve long after her death. As time passed, her name was passed down through the ages, transforming from a symbol of royal authority into something almost mythic. The story of her life became a tapestry of conflicting images: a beautiful seductress, a political mastermind, a queen who stood at the crossroads of two of the greatest powers in the ancient world. These contradictions became the foundation of her enduring allure, and her impact on both Egypt and Rome would be felt for centuries to come. Let's consider how Cleopatra's image evolved in the Roman world, particularly after Octavian, later Augustus, secured his grip on the Roman Empire. Augustus, in his quest to solidify his rule and control over the Roman populace, crafted a narrative that served his political agenda. Cleopatra became a central figure in his propaganda machine, painted as a foreign queen who sought to manipulate Roman men for her own gain. In this narrative, she was the villain, the seductress who had almost brought down the Roman Empire through her manipulations of both Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. The image of Cleopatra as a temptress was not just an insult. It was a deliberate attempt to discredit her political prowess and reframe her as a mere player in a male-dominated political system. Yet even within the context of Roman propaganda, Cleopatra's intelligence and political skill were hard to ignore. She was portrayed as a cunning woman who understood the intricacies of Roman politics and who used her beauty and charm to manipulate the most powerful men in Rome. But while this portrayal may have served Augustus's agenda, it also inadvertently highlighted the strength of Cleopatra's character. It was clear that Cleopatra had not merely used her beauty to win the affections of powerful men. She had used her intellect, her cunning, and her diplomatic acumen to secure the survival of Egypt and maintain her dynasty's position in a world dominated by Rome. Historians still debate the extent to which Cleopatra's relationships with Caesar and Antony were purely political, or whether they were driven by genuine affection. What we do know, however, is that Cleopatra was a woman who had a clear understanding of her circumstances and what needed to be done to preserve her kingdom. Her alliances with these Roman men were not about love or desire. They were about survival. And Cleopatra, ever the strategist, understood that. After her death, the Roman world continued to see Cleopatra as a figure of intrigue, a symbol of both beauty and danger. Yet, as the centuries passed, her image began to shift. In the Middle Ages, Cleopatra was largely forgotten in the West, overshadowed by other more prominent figures. But the Renaissance, with its renewed interest in classical antiquity, brought Cleopatra's story back to the forefront. In this new context, Cleopatra was no longer just a villainous seductress. She was reimagined as a tragic, misunderstood figure, a queen who had fought valiantly for her kingdom and her people. The Renaissance saw a resurgence of interest in Cleopatra as a symbol of feminine power and political authority. Artists, writers, and scholars began to celebrate her intelligence, her wit, and her determination to protect Egypt from the growing dominance of Rome. In the plays of Shakespeare, for example, Cleopatra was portrayed as a complex character, both strong and vulnerable, who navigated the treacherous world of Roman politics with grace and intelligence. Shakespeare's portrayal of Cleopatra as a woman who used both her intellect and her charm to navigate the complex world of power only added to her mystique. During the 18th and 19th centuries, Cleopatra's image continued to evolve. As Europe experienced waves of romanticism, Cleopatra became an icon of passion, tragedy, and exotic allure. In art and literature, she was portrayed as both a beautiful and tragic figure, someone who had been forced to make impossible choices in order to protect her kingdom. The myth of Cleopatra as a lover of great men, however, persisted. The focus was often on her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, and her love affairs were romanticized in literature and art. But even in these later portrayals, there was a growing recognition of Cleopatra's political genius. Her relationships with Caesar and Antony were not just about romance. They were alliances that allowed her to maintain Egypt's autonomy, however briefly. In this way, Cleopatra's story became a symbol not just of beauty and seduction, but of strength, strategy, and intelligence. She was a woman who understood the power of diplomacy and knew how to use it to her advantage, even when the odds were stacked against her. Fast forward to the modern era, and Cleopatra's story remains as compelling as ever. In the 20th century, the film industry helped to immortalize Cleopatra as a larger-than-life figure. The 1963 film Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, turned her into a cinematic icon, a glamorous queen who could both captivate the heart of Caesar and bring down the mighty Antony. While the film took liberties with historical accuracy, it also reinforced the myth of Cleopatra as a woman whose charm and political skill made her unforgettable. Yet, in recent years, there has been a shift in how Cleopatra is portrayed in popular culture. Today, there is a growing recognition of Cleopatra as a ruler in her own right, someone who was more than just a lover or a seductress. Her intelligence, her diplomatic skill, and her ability to navigate the political landscape of her time have come to the forefront. The narrative of Cleopatra as a political mastermind, someone who used her relationships strategically to secure the future of Egypt, has become more prominent in historical scholarship and media portrayals. In this modern retelling, Cleopatra is no longer just a tragic figure doomed by her relationships with powerful men. Instead, she is recognized as a woman who understood the political dynamics of her time and made choices that allowed her to survive longer than most would have thought possible. Cleopatra's legacy is no longer just about her beauty or her lovers. It is about her intellect, her agency, and her ability to shape the course of history in her own way. Cleopatra's enduring legacy serves as a reminder that history is never as simple as it seems. Her life was marked by political intrigue, romantic entanglements, and battles for power. But at its core, her story is one of survival, strategy, and leadership. She may have fallen to the might of Rome, but her influence continues to echo through the ages. In the end, Cleopatra was more than just a queen. She was a symbol of what it means to fight for your survival, to make difficult choices in the face of overwhelming odds, and to never back down in the pursuit of power and protection for your people. Her story is a testament to the complexity of history and to the power of one individual to leave a lasting mark on the world. Cleopatra's life and legacy were not just confined to the pages of history books. They became a touchstone for the exploration of power dynamics, leadership, and gender roles across time. The stories of her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony often dominate discussions about her, but they only tell part of the story. In truth, Cleopatra was a ruler who exhibited extraordinary political savvy, unmatched in her time, and her life offers a deeper understanding of the complexities of leadership, survival, and strategy. One of the key elements of Cleopatra's success as a ruler was her ability to balance her personal relationships with her political goals. She knew how to maneuver within the tight constraints of power, both in Egypt and in Rome, and she used her alliances with the two most powerful Roman men of the era, Caesar and Antony, to her advantage. But Cleopatra was no mere political puppet. She was an active participant in the shaping of her destiny. She wasn't afraid to take bold steps, to engage in the kind of bold diplomacy that others might have shied away from. Her famous relationship with Julius Caesar, for example, wasn't simply about romance. It was a calculated political move, one that secured her place on Egypt's throne and gave her the support she needed to assert her power over her rivals. Yet her relationship with Caesar also became a source of great strength and ultimately great vulnerability. Caesar, in many ways, helped solidify Cleopatra's reign, but her dependence on Roman power made Egypt vulnerable to Roman imperial ambitions. The death of Caesar in 44 BC forced Cleopatra to reconsider her political strategy and look for another Roman ally, and this time she turned to Mark Antony. Their relationship, filled with passion, strategy, and intrigue, was pivotal to Cleopatra's efforts to secure Egypt's place in the world. As with Caesar, Cleopatra's alliance with Antony was not just personal. It was deeply political. Together they fought against Octavian, later Augustus, and the forces that threatened to destroy everything Cleopatra had worked so hard to build. Unfortunately, as history would have it, Cleopatra's alliance with Antony ultimately led to her downfall. The Battle of Actium in 31 BC, which pitted Antony and Cleopatra against Octavian's forces, ended in a catastrophic defeat. The battle not only marked the end of Cleopatra and Antony's ambitions, but also sealed the fate of Egypt. Octavian's victory allowed him to solidify his control over Rome, and with the fall of Egypt, Rome became the dominant power in the Mediterranean. Cleopatra's death soon followed, marking the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the incorporation of Egypt into the Roman Empire. But even in defeat, Cleopatra's story didn't fade into the background of history. Instead, her legacy has grown more complex and multifaceted, as historians have come to see her as more than just a beautiful queen with political alliances. She is now understood as a shrewd leader, a ruler who strategically navigated the treacherous waters of Roman politics and used every available tool to secure the survival of her kingdom. Her leadership skills were critical to her ability to maintain control over Egypt during one of the most turbulent periods in its history. Historians have also taken a closer look at Cleopatra's personal life and its impact on her rule. While her relationships with Caesar and Antony were certainly significant, they were not the only factors that shaped her reign. Cleopatra's intelligence, political acumen, and understanding of diplomacy were equally important to her ability to hold power. She was highly educated, fluent in several languages, and well-versed in the history and politics of both Egypt and Rome. Her knowledge of Roman politics, in particular, played a crucial role in her efforts to navigate the complex political landscape of the time. One of the most remarkable aspects of Cleopatra's reign was her ability to maintain Egypt's independence in the face of Rome's growing power. Egypt was a wealthy and strategically important kingdom, and Cleopatra knew that she needed to find a way to protect her people and her land from the increasingly powerful Roman Empire. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were just one aspect of her strategy to safeguard Egypt's autonomy. Cleopatra used her diplomatic skills to forge alliances with powerful Roman figures, securing her kingdom's position in the Mediterranean world. She also implemented a series of economic reforms that helped to stabilize Egypt and ensure its continued prosperity. In addition to her political and economic efforts, Cleopatra was also deeply committed to preserving Egypt's cultural heritage. As the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, Cleopatra understood the importance of maintaining the traditions of Egypt's ancient civilization. She worked to restore temples, promote Egyptian culture, and ensure that Egypt's religious and cultural practices remained central to the kingdom's identity. Her efforts to preserve Egypt's heritage were crucial to maintaining the loyalty of her people, even in the face of Roman expansion. Yet despite her best efforts, Cleopatra was ultimately unable to prevent the fall of Egypt. Her death, along with Antony's, marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the absorption of Egypt into the Roman Empire. But even after her death, Cleopatra's influence continued to shape the world in profound ways. Her image as a powerful, intelligent Cleopatra's life and legacy have been interpreted in many different ways over the centuries, and her story has been retold countless times in literature, art, and film. She has been portrayed as a romantic heroine, a tragic figure, and a cunning manipulator. But through all the interpretations, one thing remains clear. Cleopatra was a woman who understood the intricacies of power and used her intellect, charm, and ambition to secure her place in history. In many ways, Cleopatra's story is a reminder of the complexity of leadership and the difficult choices that rulers must make in order to survive. She was a woman who faced immense challenges, and used her political savvy to overcome them. Her relationships with Caesar and Antony may have been a key part of her story, but they were not the only factors that shaped her reign. Cleopatra was a ruler in her own right, and her ability to navigate the treacherous political waters of the ancient world is a testament to her skill and intelligence. While Cleopatra's reign came to an end with her death, her legacy continues to endure. She remains one of the most fascinating and complex figures in history, a woman whose life and legacy continue to captivate the imagination of people around the world. Her story is one of survival, power, and the enduring struggle to maintain control over one's destiny in the face of overwhelming odds. Cleopatra's story, though tragically cut short, reverberates far beyond the ancient world. Over the centuries, her name has become synonymous with power, beauty, and strategy, and her legacy endures as a symbol of how a woman can command both affection and authority in a male-dominated world. It's fascinating to consider how her story has evolved from ancient accounts to modern interpretations, transforming from a political figure to a mythic icon that continues to capture the imagination of audiences worldwide. In the centuries following Cleopatra's death, her reputation was molded by the Roman Empire's need to consolidate its power and portray its enemies in the most negative light. Augustus, in particular, had a vested interest in ensuring that Cleopatra was remembered as a dangerous, manipulative foreign queen who nearly brought down the Roman Empire. He used her image as a foil to his own rise to power, depicting her as a seductress who had used her charm to control two of Rome's greatest generals. This portrayal, though it suited Augustus's political agenda, oversimplified the complexity of Cleopatra's actions and motivations. In ancient texts, such as those written by Plutarch and Dio Cassius, Cleopatra was painted as a temptress, an outsider who used her beauty to control powerful men. Yet, historians today argue that this is a gross misrepresentation of her. Cleopatra was far more than a mere object of desire. She was an intelligent and capable leader, deeply involved in the political, cultural, and diplomatic affairs of her kingdom. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were not just about romance. They were strategic alliances forged out of necessity. Alliances that allowed her to maintain Egypt's autonomy in the face of Rome's growing power. Cleopatra's life was one of constant political maneuvering. She was not just an observer of the shifting tides of Roman politics. She was an active participant. She used her personal relationships with Roman leaders to secure her place on Egypt's throne and to protect her kingdom from Roman expansion. While her alliances were often seen as personal, they were ultimately political decisions that had long-term ramifications for both Egypt and Rome. One of Cleopatra's greatest strengths was her ability to navigate complex political environments. She was a master of diplomacy, able to balance her relationships with Caesar and Antony, while also maintaining Egypt's interests. Her ability to charm and influence powerful men is often portrayed as her greatest asset. But it was her strategic thinking that allowed her to hold on to power for as long as she did. Cleopatra was not a passive ruler. She was a shrewd and calculating monarch who understood the value of alliances, especially in a world where military strength and political maneuvering were essential for survival. Historians have also noted Cleopatra's remarkable ability to manage Egypt's resources and economy. As the last pharaoh of Egypt, she faced the daunting task of protecting the kingdom from Roman conquest, while also ensuring that Egypt remained prosperous. She was not just a queen, she was an administrator who managed Egypt's vast wealth and resources with skill and foresight. Her reign saw numerous economic reforms, including improvements to Egypt's infrastructure and the cultivation of important trade routes. While Cleopatra's reign was undoubtedly marked by her personal relationships with powerful Roman men, she was also a monarch who cared deeply for her people. She worked to ensure that Egypt's culture, religion, and traditions were preserved, even as her kingdom became increasingly entangled with Rome. Cleopatra's commitment to her people was one of the defining aspects of her reign. She was not simply a figurehead. She was a hands-on ruler who understood the importance of maintaining the dignity and heritage of Egypt in a world that was rapidly changing. Even in her final days, as she faced inevitable defeat at the hands of Octavian, Cleopatra remained steadfast in her determination to protect Egypt's sovereignty. The Battle of Actium, where her fleet was decisively defeated, marked the turning point in her fight to maintain power. After the battle, Cleopatra and Antony retreated to Alexandria, where they would eventually face their demise. Cleopatra's death, though tragic, marked the end of an era in which Egypt, though weakened, was still a player in the Mediterranean world. With her death, Egypt fell under Roman control, and the once great kingdom was absorbed into the empire. But Cleopatra's legacy did not end with her death. In the centuries that followed, her story would be reimagined by countless artists, writers, and filmmakers. The myth of Cleopatra, the seductive queen who brought down two of Rome's greatest generals, became a central theme in Western culture. Artists like Shakespeare, in his play Antony and Cleopatra, portrayed her as a tragic romantic figure, a queen whose love for Antony led to her downfall. This portrayal of Cleopatra as a tragic lover has persisted for centuries, further solidifying her place in popular culture. In the 20th century, Cleopatra's image took on a new life. The 1963 film Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, helped solidify her status as a cultural icon. The film, though far from historically accurate, emphasized the romantic aspects of Cleopatra's story, focusing on her relationships with Caesar and Antony. Yet, even in this portrayal, Cleopatra was not merely a seductress. She was a queen, a political figure whose relationships were crucial to her survival. Today, Cleopatra's legacy is more nuanced. While the myths surrounding her life and death continue to captivate audiences, there is a growing recognition of her intelligence, political acumen, and leadership. Cleopatra is no longer simply the tragic queen who lost everything in the name of love. She is seen as a powerful ruler who fought for her kingdom's survival against the might of Rome. Her relationships with Caesar and Antony are now understood as strategic, not just romantic, and her ability to navigate the treacherous political landscape of her time is now more appreciated than ever. Cleopatra remains one of the most fascinating and complex figures in history. Her story is one of ambition, survival, love, and loss, but it is also a story of leadership, intelligence, and resilience. She was a queen who understood the importance of power, not just for herself, but for her people. Her legacy endures because she was a woman who, despite the forces arrayed against her, refused to be a passive figure in history. Cleopatra's story, in all its complexity, serves as a reminder of the ways in which history is shaped by the actions of individuals, and how the legacies of those individuals can endure long after their deaths. As we look back on Cleopatra's life, we see not just a queen who fell victim to the forces of Rome, but a woman who fought to the very end to preserve her kingdom and her legacy. Her name lives on, a symbol of intelligence, strength, and resilience. In a world where the tides of history often wash away the contributions of women, Cleopatra remains a shining example of a ruler who, through her intelligence and determination, left an indelible mark on the world. Cleopatra's story continues to fascinate because of the intricate blend of her personal life, political ambitions, and the immense challenges she faced as the ruler of Egypt. Her life wasn't just a series of dramatic events, it was a carefully constructed series of political moves, alliances, and betrayals. When we think of Cleopatra, it's easy to imagine her as a woman of extreme beauty and seductive charm. But that would be to miss the larger and much more significant part of her identity, her political genius. Cleopatra was not simply a figurehead. She was the architect of her own survival in an ancient world dominated by male rulers. At the heart of Cleopatra's strategy was her ability to manipulate the politics of the time through alliances with two of Rome's most powerful figures, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. These alliances were not born out of romantic desire alone, but out of necessity. Cleopatra understood that Egypt's survival depended on securing the favor of Rome. This wasn't just a matter of aligning with powerful men. It was a matter of ensuring that Egypt, her kingdom, was not swept away by the ever-expanding Romans' empire. Her relationship with Julius Caesar was particularly pivotal, and it wasn't just about love. After Caesar's victory in Rome's civil war, Cleopatra saw an opportunity to solidify her position on the throne. By forming an alliance with Caesar, she secured her reign in Egypt and gave birth to Caesarion, her son, who was the offspring of their union. Cleopatra was not simply using Caesar to get ahead. She was positioning herself to ensure the survival of her dynasty. Caesar's support not only helped her regain the throne after being briefly ousted by her brother, Ptolemy III, but it also gave her leverage against Rome's growing influence over Egypt. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's love for Caesar was genuine or simply a political maneuver, but what is clear is that their partnership was mutually beneficial, allowing her to maintain her power while offering Rome's support in return. Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, however, threw Cleopatra's carefully laid plans into turmoil. Rome was now plunged into chaos, and Cleopatra had to find a new ally to help her navigate this unstable political landscape. Enter Mark Antony. Antony, a general and one of Caesar's closest allies, was someone Cleopatra could rely on for both political support and military backing. Their relationship soon blossomed, both personally and politically, as Cleopatra sought to stabilize her position, and Antony worked to gain control of Rome's eastern territories. Their union brought forth two children, Alexander Helio and Cleopatra Selene II. These children not only served as symbols of their alliance, but also provided Cleopatra with an additional means of securing her power and influence. Yet, even with Antony as an ally, Cleopatra's situation grew increasingly precarious. The political dynamics of Rome, with its shifting allegiances and power struggles, threatened to undermine the fragile coalition between Cleopatra and Antony. Meanwhile, Octavian, the future Augustus, was maneuvering to consolidate his power in Rome. His growing influence became an existential threat to Cleopatra and Antony's ambitions, and the stage was set for the final confrontation that would define Cleopatra's fate. The Battle of Actium in 31 BC is often seen as the decisive moment in Cleopatra's life. This naval battle, fought between the forces of Octavian and the combined forces of Cleopatra and Antony, was a direct result of the political and personal rivalry between the two men. Although Antony and Cleopatra fought valiantly, their fleet was decisively defeated, and their combined forces were broken. The loss of the battle sealed Cleopatra's fate and marked the beginning of the end for both her reign and Egypt's independence. Following their defeat, Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Alexandria, where the final moments of their lives would unfold. In the aftermath of the Battle of Actium, Cleopatra's kingdom was already in ruins. Octavian, now the undisputed ruler of Rome, moved swiftly to take control of Egypt. His forces were closing in on Alexandria, and Cleopatra, realizing that capture and public humiliation awaited her, made the difficult decision to end her life on her own terms. The legendary story of her death, whether by snakebite or poison, has become one of history's most enduring and mysterious narratives. Cleopatra's death, in the context of her life, was not a tragic surrender but rather a final act of defiance. She chose to go out on her own terms, preserving some semblance of dignity for herself and her kingdom in the face of inevitable defeat. The aftermath of Cleopatra's death saw Egypt formally annexed by Rome, becoming just another province within the empire. The fall of Egypt marked the end of one of the most powerful and culturally rich civilizations in the ancient world. Yet, despite the collapse of her kingdom, Cleopatra's legacy would continue to echo throughout history. Her life has been examined, dissected, and mythologized for centuries, and she remains one of the most iconic figures in world history. What makes Cleopatra's story so enduring is the combination of her remarkable political skill and the complex web of relationships that she navigated. She was not simply a romantic figure or a beautiful woman. She was a political strategist who understood the dynamics of power, both within Egypt and in the broader Mediterranean world. She was a ruler who understood that survival often meant making difficult, sometimes morally ambiguous choices. Her alliances with Caesar and Antony were not based solely on love. They were calculated moves designed to preserve Egypt's sovereignty and protect her people. Cleopatra's death may have marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty, but her legacy endured in the collective consciousness of the ancient world and beyond. In Rome, she was remembered as a villain, a foreign queen who had nearly toppled the Roman Empire. Yet, in Egypt, she was mourned as a protector of her people, a queen who had fought to the end to keep Egypt free. In many ways, Cleopatra was a figure ahead of her time, a ruler who was willing to use her intellect, her charm, and her relationships to shape the world around her. Her story transcends the boundaries of time and place, resonating with audiences today who see in her not just a beautiful queen, but a woman who defied the odds and made her mark on history. Cleopatra's life is a powerful reminder that, in the face of adversity, intelligence, ambition, and courage can be just as powerful as military might. Her legacy continues to inspire leaders, scholars, and artists, and she remains one of the most fascinating figures in history. Cleopatra, for all her complexities, embodies the idea of a woman who knew how to survive and thrive in the harshest of circumstances. Her story reminds us that power, in its many forms, is not just about brute force, but about intelligence, relationships, and strategic thinking. Her reign may have ended in defeat, but her legacy is one that will never fade. Even after Cleopatra's death, her story has continued to evolve in the collective memory of history. In fact, her legend has only grown over the centuries, fueled by intrigue, myth-making, and the shifting lens of cultural values. Today, Cleopatra stands as more than just a historical figure. She is a symbol of femininity, power, intellect, and resilience. She is remembered not just for the men she loved, but for how she commanded her life and her kingdom. And while much of her life has been romanticized or sensationalized over time, there is no denying her remarkable ability to navigate one of the most tumultuous political landscapes of her era. For centuries, Cleopatra's relationships with Julius, Caesar, and Mark Antony have been the primary focus of historical narratives, with many seeing her as a tragic figure caught between love and ambition. But as historical research has evolved, so too has our understanding of Cleopatra. Modern historians have placed more emphasis on her political acumen, her ability to hold power in a male-dominated world, and her vision for Egypt's future. Cleopatra was not merely a puppet queen. She was a monarch who saw the global stage and maneuvered with astuteness and resolve, ensuring her reign lasted as long as it did. This shift in perspective has highlighted just how much Cleopatra's legacy resonates with modern audiences. Cleopatra was a woman who didn't shy away from power. Instead, she embraced it, using every available tool at her disposal. Her charm, intelligence, and understanding of political alliances enabled her to maintain her position as a ruler, even when faced with some of the most powerful men in the ancient world. This is perhaps the most striking element of Cleopatra's character. She understood that power was not simply a matter of military strength or control. It was about relationships, diplomacy, and timing. Cleopatra's ability to speak multiple languages is another aspect of her legacy that resonates with contemporary audiences. She was one of the few rulers of her time to speak Egyptian, in addition to Greek and other languages, which gave her an edge in diplomacy and in governing Egypt. Her intellectual prowess was not just about acquiring knowledge, it was about using that knowledge to advance her kingdom's interests and protect its sovereignty. While some may view her education as a product of her royal upbringing, it was ultimately a tool for survival in the cutthroat world of ancient politics. Her relationships with Roman rulers are important, but they should not overshadow her own achievements as a ruler in her own right. Cleopatra's leadership was marked by her active involvement in the administration of Egypt. She worked tirelessly to maintain her kingdom's economy, particularly its vast agricultural resources, which were vital to Egypt's wealth and strategic importance. As ruler, Cleopatra implemented important reforms, managed Egypt's grain production, and even negotiated trade agreements that ensured Egypt's continued prosperity. At a time when many rulers relied heavily on military power, Cleopatra's emphasis on diplomacy, economic development, and cultural preservation helped maintain Egypt's relevance. In her diplomatic relations, Cleopatra knew when to form alliances and when to engage in conflict. She skillfully used her relationships with Caesar and Antony to maintain Egypt's autonomy while strategically positioning herself as an essential ally to Rome. She understood the precarious balance between power and dependence and knew how to use her influence to ensure that Egypt's sovereignty was preserved. Even as Egypt's autonomy was ultimately swept away by Roman control, Cleopatra's ability to negotiate, communicate, and leverage her position ensured that Egypt remained relevant until the end of her reign. What is perhaps most captivating about Cleopatra is her refusal to be silenced by the constraints of her time. In an era when women were often relegated to passive roles, Cleopatra stepped into the arena of political leadership with unmatched confidence and conviction. Her ability to wield power in a time when women were often excluded from high political office speaks to her exceptional character and strategic thinking. She was not simply a figurehead, but a ruler who understood the complexities of leadership, diplomacy, and statecraft. As Egypt fell under Roman control after Cleopatra's death, her legacy was not so easily erased. The Romans, eager to consolidate their empire, sought to diminish her power, reducing her to the archetype of the foreign, seductive queen who had enticed their greatest generals. But despite their efforts, Cleopatra's story lived on in the art, literature, and culture of the time. Writers, poets, and playwrights from both Rome and Egypt reimagined her as a tragic figure whose love affairs with Caesar and Antony were both a source of strength and of destruction. These romanticized versions of Cleopatra's life often overshadowed the true complexity of her reign, but they also cemented her status as a powerful, if controversial, figure in world history. The Renaissance saw a revival of interest in Cleopatra, and her story became a favorite subject for artists and writers. The myth of Cleopatra as a tragic lover, caught between her personal desires and her political ambitions, was particularly influential in European culture. Artists like Jean-Louis David and playwrights like William Shakespeare brought her to life in ways that focused on her dramatic, emotional story. Cleopatra's beauty, intellect, and tragic end became central themes in these works, which contributed to the lasting appeal of her character in the Western imagination. The 20th century saw Cleopatra's image take on a new life with the advent of cinema. The 1963 film Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, depicted the Queen's passionate relationships with Caesar and Antony. While the film's historical accuracy was questioned, its portrayal of Cleopatra as a powerful and alluring queen further cemented her status as an iconic figure. The film's success not only revived interest in Cleopatra's life, but also introduced her to a new generation of audiences who saw her as a symbol of both beauty and political power. Today, Cleopatra remains a subject of fascination for people all over the world. Her life has been the subject of countless books, films, and documentaries. Her image as a beautiful seductress continues to captivate audiences, but there is a growing recognition of her true power and the strategic decisions that made her one of the most successful rulers in the ancient world. Cleopatra's story is one of survival, resilience, and intelligence in the face of overwhelming odds. Her legacy lives on not just in the annals of history, but in our understanding of what it means to be a powerful woman in a world dominated by men. Cleopatra's life was a testament to the power of intelligence, diplomacy, and the ability to navigate the shifting tides of politics. Her story is not just one of tragedy or romance. It is a story of a woman who ruled with intellect and courage, carving out a place for herself in the history of the world. As Cleopatra's life and legacy continue to be explored, one of the most intriguing aspects of her story is the way in which she manipulated both Roman politics and her own kingdom's destiny. It's easy to focus on her relationships with men like Caesar and Antony, but this oversimplifies her approach to power. Cleopatra's mastery of diplomacy, her understanding of what it meant to hold sway in the Mediterranean world, and her ability to use both her intellect and her charm to manipulate situations are equally important aspects of her reign. She was a ruler who understood the fleeting nature of power and the necessity of constantly shifting alliances to maintain influence. One of the most striking examples of Cleopatra's political genius was her ability to secure her place on Egypt's throne after the death of her father, Ptolemy III. Egypt's throne had often been a site of intense competition, with family members constantly vying for power. After her father's death, Cleopatra initially ruled alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy III. But the two siblings quickly found themselves at odds. Cleopatra, far more politically savvy and ambitious than her brother, found herself forced into exile after a power struggle. It was during this period that she began to form her first strategic alliances, one of which would be with Julius Caesar. Cleopatra's ability to form this alliance was not accidental. She saw Caesar as someone who could help her regain the throne, but she also understood that her relationship with Caesar had to be more than just personal. It had to be political. Her arrival in Rome, accompanied by her infant son Caesarion, was a calculated move designed to secure Caesar's favor. The public spectacle of Cleopatra entering Rome, not as a mere visitor but as a queen and mother to Caesar's son, was an attempt to solidify her place in the Roman political sphere. Historians still debate the nature of her relationship with Caesar. Some argue that Cleopatra was simply using him as a political tool, while others suggest that there was genuine affection between the two. The truth is likely somewhere in between. Cleopatra understood the value of maintaining political alliances, and she knew that aligning herself with Caesar would ensure her position as Egypt's ruler. In return, Caesar recognized Cleopatra's intelligence, her understanding of governance, and her ability to wield power. This mutual respect formed the basis of their alliance, which had lasting ramifications for both Egypt and Rome. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, Cleopatra found herself again at a crossroads. With her political fortunes tied to Caesar's, her survival depended on finding another powerful Roman ally. She turned to Mark Antony, who was struggling for control of Rome in the aftermath of Caesar's death. Antony, like Caesar before him, saw the value in allying with Cleopatra. Egypt was rich, and Cleopatra's kingdom was strategically vital. By forming an alliance with her, Antony could bolster his power base and secure support for his military campaigns in the East. Cleopatra's relationship with Antony, however, was far more than just political. The two shared a deep personal connection, and their bond produced two children, Alexander Helio and Cleopatra Selene. These children were symbols of their union, and Cleopatra's continued alliance with Antony helped to maintain her grip on power in Egypt. But as much as the relationship was personal, it was also a matter of survival. Cleopatra and Antony's combined strength gave Egypt a fighting chance in the face of growing Roman imperialism. Their partnership, however, was doomed from the start. While Cleopatra and Antony focused on their political and military strategies, Rome, under the leadership of Octavian, later Augustus, was moving quickly to consolidate power. Octavian's rise to power was inevitable, and his rivalry with Antony and Cleopatra would culminate in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. This battle, a pivotal moment in the history of Rome, marked the end of Cleopatra's hopes of maintaining Egypt's independence. The defeat of Cleopatra and Antony at Actium was not just a military loss, it was a personal one. Cleopatra had staked everything on her alliance with Antony, and with his defeat came the collapse of her world. In the aftermath, as Octavian's forces closed in on Alexandria, Cleopatra faced the inevitable collapse of her kingdom. She had been outmaneuvered, and her choices had led her to this tragic moment. In an attempt to retain some dignity and control over her fate, Cleopatra made the fateful decision to end her life on her own terms. The myth of Cleopatra's death is one of the most enduring aspects of her story. The traditional account, her death by snakebite with an asp, has been immortalized in art and literature. While historians still debate the exact circumstances of her death, the idea of Cleopatra choosing death over capture has become symbolic of her unyielding will and defiance against the forces that sought to subjugate her and her kingdom. It is often seen as her final act of resistance, an assertion of control in a world where she had little left to hold on to. However, the legacy of Cleopatra cannot be reduced to a tragic ending. Even in her final moments, she embodied the qualities that had defined her life: intelligence, strategy, and resilience. Her ability to make difficult decisions and her refusal to accept defeat, even in the face of overwhelming odds, are aspects of her character that continue to resonate with us today. Cleopatra's legacy is one of empowerment, of a woman who refused to be passive in the face of empire-building powers and fought for her kingdom until the very end. Cleopatra's death marked the end of an era for Egypt, but it also signified the beginning of a new phase in Roman history. Egypt became a Roman province, and the Ptolemaic dynasty came to a close. But even as Rome absorbed Egypt, Cleopatra's story continued to echo through the ages. She became a symbol of power, beauty, and intellect, and her name has been immortalized in art, literature, and film. Today, Cleopatra remains one of the most compelling figures in history. Her story transcends time and place, and her influence continues to inspire those who study her life. Cleopatra was not just a woman of beauty and passion. She was a ruler who understood the complexities of power, the need for alliances, and the importance of survival. Her legacy continues to captivate the imagination of people around the world, and her life remains a testament to the ability of one person to change the course of history. As Cleopatra's story continues to captivate the imagination of audiences worldwide, it's important to reflect on her enduring legacy. Beyond her relationships with the two great Roman figures, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, Cleopatra's true brilliance lies in how she navigated the ever-changing and treacherous political landscapes of the ancient world. Her reign was marked by political cunning, resilience, and the constant balancing act of maintaining Egypt's sovereignty while also aligning with Rome when necessary. Cleopatra's story is one of survival, adaptation, and evolution. While many may focus on her romantic relationships, it is crucial to understand that Cleopatra's political intelligence was the true driver of her actions. Her use of alliances and manipulation of power dynamics set her apart from other rulers of the time. Cleopatra's reign was a direct challenge to the increasing influence of Rome in the Mediterranean, and she employed every tool at her disposal to ensure Egypt's survival. Her ability to form strategic alliances with powerful Roman generals was essential to her rule. Her first significant political maneuver was her alliance with Julius Caesar, which was crucial for her regaining the throne after being ousted by her brother. Caesar was more than just a lover. He was the key to restoring her to power. In return, Cleopatra provided Caesar with Egypt's resources, particularly its grain stores, which were vital to Rome's survival. Their relationship, though romantic, was fundamentally a political strategy that benefited both parties. Cleopatra's decision to travel to Rome, accompanied by her infant son, Caesarion, was a calculated move designed to solidify her place in Caesar's inner circle. Her alliance with Caesar ensured that Egypt remained a powerful force in the ancient world, but Caesar's assassination in 44 BC thrust her into a difficult position. With Rome in turmoil, Cleopatra had to find a new Roman ally, and this time she turned to Mark Antony. Like Caesar, Antony was a powerful Roman leader whose support would solidify her position in Egypt. Their union, both political and personal, led to the birth of twins, Alexander Helio and Cleopatra Selene, further symbolizing the strength of their partnership. Their relationship, though based on mutual benefit, was complicated by Antony's own political struggles within Rome, particularly with Octavian, Caesar's heir and rival. Historians still debate the nature of Cleopatra's relationship with Antony. Was it driven purely by politics, or did she truly love him? While it's difficult to say for certain, it's clear that Cleopatra's decisions were always calculated with her kingdom's survival in mind. She was not a passive participant in her alliances. She was an active player, using her influence and charm to secure her kingdom's future. Her ability to maintain Egypt's sovereignty through these alliances speaks to her political genius. However, despite her best efforts, Cleopatra could not escape the inevitable rise of Octavian. The Battle of Actium in 31 BC, which pitted the forces of Antony and Cleopatra against Octavian, proved to be the turning point in her fight for survival. The defeat of Antony and Cleopatra's forces meant the end of their ambitions, and Cleopatra was forced to confront the reality of losing everything she had worked so hard to build. Her strategic alliances, which had served her well for years, could not shield her from the growing power of Rome. After the battle, Cleopatra and Antony retreated to Alexandria, where they faced the end of their reigns. Cleopatra's fate was sealed by her defeat at Actium, and as Octavian's forces advanced, she made the heartbreaking decision to end her life on her own terms. The story of Cleopatra's death, often depicted as a dramatic and heroic choice, remains one of the most iconic moments in history. Whether she died by snakebite, poison, or another method, Cleopatra's final act was one of defiance. In choosing to die rather than face capture and humiliation, she preserved some semblance of dignity for herself and her kingdom. While her death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and Egypt's independence, Cleopatra's legacy has lived on through the centuries. The Roman Empire, having absorbed Egypt, would go on to become the dominant power in the Mediterranean. But Cleopatra remained a figure of fascination, especially in the arts, literature, and popular culture. The portrayal of Cleopatra as a tragic, powerful, and enigmatic queen continued to evolve as different generations saw her through their own lens. In the Renaissance, for example, Cleopatra was seen as a tragic figure caught between love and power, with artists and playwrights focusing on her relationships with Caesar and Antony. Shakespeare's play Antony and Cleopatra is a prime example of this romanticized portrayal, in which Cleopatra's intelligence and political acumen are often overshadowed by her relationship with Antony. In these works, Cleopatra was presented as a symbol of love and loss, a queen whose passion for her Roman lovers ultimately led to her downfall. In the modern era, Cleopatra's story has been reinterpreted once again. The 1963 film Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, brought the Queen's story to a new generation of audiences, reimagining her as both a glamorous seductress and a powerful monarch. Though the film was not historically accurate, it captured the enduring myth of Cleopatra's beauty and intelligence, and it solidified her place as one of the most iconic figures in cinematic history. Yet as modern scholarship has advanced, so too has our understanding of Cleopatra. Today, she is recognized not just for her beauty and relationships, but for her political ingenuity, her leadership, and her resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. She was not simply a romantic figure. She was a ruler who fought to preserve her kingdom in the face of an unstoppable empire. Her reign, though marked by personal loss and political defeat, also serves as a reminder of the complexities of leadership and the choices that rulers must make to protect their people. Cleopatra's legacy is not one of simple victory or defeat. It is one of survival, intelligence, and strategy. Her story serves as a testament to the power of intellect and diplomacy in shaping history. She was a woman who faced enormous challenges but refused to back down. Her ability to navigate the complex political dynamics of the ancient world is a mark of her extraordinary character. While Cleopatra may have lost the battle against Rome, her legacy has endured for millennia, evolving from a symbol of seduction to one of political brilliance. She is remembered not just for the men she loved, but for the way she shaped the course of history with her intelligence, her power, and her unyielding determination. Cleopatra, in all her complexity, remains one of the most fascinating and influential figures in world history. Cleopatra's influence, even after her death, has had a profound impact on the world, shaping both the ancient and modern worlds in ways that continue to surprise us today. Her legacy as one of the most powerful women in history has evolved over centuries, constantly shifting in interpretation and symbolism, from seductress to strategic ruler. Despite the portrayal of her downfall in history as one of tragic romance and defeat, Cleopatra's life has remained a beacon for the exploration of power, politics, and identity. Her image as a powerful female ruler in a patriarchal world remains central to the understanding of leadership and gender roles in both ancient and contemporary times. Cleopatra's ability to command not only a kingdom but also an empire through alliances, intellect, and strategic marriages is more than just a tale of romance. It is a reflection of the complexities and difficulties women face in positions of power, particularly in societies dominated by men. Her story has been used to explore the nuanced ways in which women in history have navigated power dynamics and made their voices heard, even when the forces surrounding them tried to silence them. Cleopatra's political strategy was based not just on her relationships with Caesar and Antony, but also on her deep understanding of Roman politics, culture, and the shifting tides of power. Rome was the greatest empire of the time, and Cleopatra knew that survival meant securing Rome's favor. Her alliances were essential to maintaining Egypt's independence, but at the same time, they ensured she had the leverage necessary to rule effectively. She never relied solely on her looks or charms. Rather, Cleopatra used her intellect and personal power to ensure her kingdom's survival and her reign's continued legitimacy. By securing her relationships with powerful Roman generals, she put herself in a unique position to act as a kingmaker, using Roman political developments to Egypt's advantage. It's also crucial to note how Cleopatra reinvented herself and her image in different political contexts. As a Ptolemaic ruler, she needed to make herself appear both Egyptian and Greek, because the Ptolemaic dynasty was of Macedonian Greek origin. In public, she portrayed herself as the living embodiment of the goddess Isis, associating her leadership with the divine protection of Egypt. This imagery reinforced her legitimacy in the eyes of the Egyptian people, who had long worshipped their pharaohs as gods. This was an essential element of Cleopatra's strategy to maintain her power in Egypt, for it helped solidify her position in the face of challenges both from within and without her kingdom. By reinforcing her role as both a monarch and a divine ruler, Cleopatra strengthened her cultural legitimacy, thereby ensuring that Egypt remained loyal to her leadership. As for her political alliances, Cleopatra's affair with Caesar was not the first time she would use a Roman relationship to further Egypt's interests. After the death of her father, Cleopatra faced a divided kingdom and a young, ambitious brother who was more than willing to fight her for control of the throne. However, the alliance with Caesar didn't just restore her position, it made Egypt a key player in Roman politics. Caesar, recognizing her political acumen and strategic mind, gave her support, ensuring her rule would continue in Egypt. In exchange, Cleopatra helped Caesar consolidate power by providing resources and acting as a stabilizing force in the Mediterranean. When Caesar was assassinated, Cleopatra again faced a precarious situation. She had a son, Caesarion, whom she could present as Caesar's heir, thus making her a powerful figure in Rome's political landscape. This situation led her to form an alliance with Mark Antony, another general who was attempting to take control of the Roman world after Caesar's death. Antony and Cleopatra's alliance was both political and personal, and their union produced children who could one day play significant roles in the future of Egypt and Rome. However, their relationship, while politically advantageous at the time, became increasingly untenable as the political rivalry between Antony and Octavian grew. Octavian, Julius Caesar's heir, saw Cleopatra's influence over Antony as a challenge to his own ambitions. To Octavian, Cleopatra was a foreign queen, who was wielding Roman power for her own gain. This growing tension culminated in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, where Octavian decisively defeated Antony and Cleopatra's forces. With their defeat, the fate of Egypt was sealed. Cleopatra's death marked not only the fall of Egypt but also the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the final absorption of Egypt into the Roman Empire. Egypt, once a great and independent kingdom, was now a Roman province. Octavian, soon to be Augustus, would go on to rule the Roman Empire with unchallenged power. And yet Cleopatra's legacy lived on in Roman culture, as both a tragic figure and a symbol of royal authority. It is fascinating that Cleopatra's story continues to resonate with us today, long after the fall of her kingdom. She has been depicted in countless films, plays, and novels, each offering a different interpretation of her life. Some have focused on her as a seductive queen, whose beauty captivated the most powerful men of Rome. Others have emphasized her political genius and ability to maintain power in a world dominated by men. Both views, while based on truth, have overlooked the complexity of Cleopatra's character. The modern-day fascination with Cleopatra is a reflection of our ongoing fascination with power, beauty, and influence. She remains an enigmatic figure, a reminder of how women have historically been both celebrated and vilified for their ability to wield power. Her story speaks to the challenges women face in positions of authority, as well as the ways in which their actions are often reduced to their relationships with men, rather than their accomplishments and contributions. Cleopatra's story is a tragic one, but it is also one of remarkable resilience. She may have been defeated in the political and military arenas, but she refused to fade into obscurity. Her life was an exercise in survival, strategy, and sheer willpower. Through her intelligence, her alliances, and her strength, Cleopatra ensured that Egypt remained a force to be reckoned with in the ancient world, even as the forces of Rome overtook it. Ultimately, Cleopatra's legacy is not just that of a woman who loved and lost two powerful men. It is the legacy of a ruler who understood the nature of power, who fought to maintain her sovereignty, and who left an indelible mark on history. Today, Cleopatra stands as a symbol of both strength and vulnerability, a queen who fought for her people, her kingdom, and her place in the world, and who will forever remain one of the most iconic and influential figures in history. As Cleopatra's influence continues to captivate historians, artists, and audiences across the world, the full scope of her legacy reveals itself as something far more profound than the sum of her relationships with Rome's elite. Over the centuries, Cleopatra's image has been reinterpreted through countless lenses, each one a reflection of the time in which it was created. However, the true essence of Cleopatra lies not in the way she was portrayed by the Romans or in later myths, but in the way she wielded power, navigated shifting political currents, and faced unimaginable challenges with determination and intelligence. Cleopatra's time as Egypt's last ruler was marked by an era of political instability and foreign encroachment. When she assumed the throne in 51 BC, Egypt was already in decline. Her father, Ptolemy X, had been a weak ruler, forced into several humiliating alliances with Rome, and the kingdom was burdened by heavy debt. Her early years as co-regent with her brother, Ptolemy the Thene, were fraught with conflict. Her younger brother's forces were aligned against her, resulting in a bitter power struggle. Cleopatra, however, demonstrated early on that she was no ordinary monarch. She not only survived this early power struggle, but also managed to restore herself to power with the help of Julius Caesar. But the real brilliance of Cleopatra was her ability to adapt to the changing political environment and to recognize when it was necessary to align with or oppose the dominant powers of the time. Her ability to balance between allegiance and autonomy, both in her personal relationships and in political strategy, was unparalleled. Her alliance with Caesar, which secured her throne, was not a mere personal bond. It was a calculated, politically motivated decision. Caesar's influence helped stabilize her rule in Egypt, but it also provided her with a means to extend Egypt's influence in the Mediterranean. In return, Cleopatra's wealth and resources were instrumental in supporting Caesar's ambitions, especially in his war against Pompey. Yet, it is Cleopatra's diplomatic acumen, more than any romantic relationship, that made her a central figure in the ancient world. Her ability to convince both Julius Caesar and Mark Antony that she could be more than just a regional player in Egypt, but a partner in global politics, was remarkable. Cleopatra knew that her kingdom's survival hinged on more than just military power. It relied on strategic alliances, manipulation of Roman ambitions, and a careful reading of the political climate. In a world where women were often sidelined in political matters, Cleopatra's skill in navigating such a male-dominated arena was nothing short of extraordinary. Her partnership with Caesar had profound consequences. The birth of her son, Caesarion, was not only an affirmation of their relationship, but also a bold political move. Cleopatra knew that having a child with Caesar could secure her reign and establish her as a central figure in Rome's political future. Though Caesar was assassinated before Caesarion could be officially recognized as the heir to Rome, Cleopatra's son symbolized the potential future of Egypt as a powerful ally of Rome. Unfortunately, with Caesar's death, Cleopatra's political situation became increasingly precarious. The next few years of her life were marked by rapid realignment, with Cleopatra's attention shifting from securing her own rule in Egypt to finding a new partner in Rome who could ensure Egypt's survival. Enter Mark Antony, who was at the time a key figure in the power struggles that followed Caesar's death. Cleopatra saw an opportunity to form another powerful alliance, one that would restore Egypt's fortunes. Her relationship with Antony, however, was not solely personal. It was another calculated political move. Together, they produced children, who would help solidify their dynastic claims in Egypt and beyond. Cleopatra's ability to use her personal life as a vehicle for maintaining political power was one of the key factors that made her such a formidable ruler. But as history unfolded, Cleopatra's alliance with Antony would prove to be her undoing. While they initially made great strides in consolidating power, Antony's rivalry with Octavian grew, setting the stage for the fatal confrontation at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. The defeat at Actium was the beginning of the end for Cleopatra's kingdom. With her forces shattered and Antony dead, Cleopatra found herself at the mercy of Octavian, the future Augustus, who was determined to incorporate Egypt into Rome's expanding empire. Despite the obvious signs of defeat, Cleopatra's final moments were an act of defiance. Rather than allow herself to be paraded in chains through the streets of Rome, Cleopatra chose to end her life in a manner that has become the stuff of legend. Whether she died by snakebite or poison is still a subject of debate, but her death symbolizes her refusal to be controlled by the forces of Rome. It was a final, dramatic act of sovereignty, a woman in control of her destiny, even as the world she fought to protect collapsed around her. Cleopatra's death marked the end of an era, With her passing, Egypt became just another province in the vast Roman Empire. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, came to a close. But even in death, Cleopatra was immortalized. Her image was reworked and reinterpreted by Roman poets, historians, and artists, each adding layers to her mythos. In the Roman narrative, she was often portrayed as a seductress, a foreign queen who had nearly brought Rome to its knees with her charm and political influence. But through the ages, Cleopatra has come to represent much more than just a femme fatale. Cleopatra's legacy transcends the framework of her personal relationships. Her reign serves as a testament to the idea that leadership is not just about military conquest or the accumulation of wealth. It is also about the ability to understand and manipulate political systems, to form the right alliances, and to survive in a world of constant change. In many ways, Cleopatra was ahead of her time. She was a woman who understood the power dynamics of the ancient world, and she navigated them with unparalleled skill. Her name has been immortalized not just in the ancient world, but also in modern culture. In literature, art, and film, Cleopatra continues to be a symbol of power, intellect, and complexity. Whether in the pages of Shakespeare's plays or in the golden age of Hollywood cinema, Cleopatra is not just a figure of the past. She is a lasting symbol of the resilience of women in power. Modern portrayals of Cleopatra have evolved to reflect not only her beauty and seduction, but also her intelligence, political savvy, and ability to command. Ultimately, Cleopatra remains one of the most enigmatic and compelling figures in world history. Her story is not just about the rise and fall of a queen. It is a story of survival, strategy, and the eternal fight to hold on to power. Her life challenges us to think about leadership, gender, and the ways in which individuals can shape the course of history. As we continue to examine Cleopatra's legacy, we are reminded that history is not just the tale of the victors. It is also the story of those who fought, loved, and sacrificed to protect what they held dear. As Cleopatra's story concludes, her legacy continues to inspire and provoke reflection. Her life, marked by brilliance, strategy, and defiance, resonates deeply with those who study leadership, diplomacy, and the enduring struggle for power. Even though Cleopatra's political survival was ultimately overrun by the expanding reach of the Roman Empire, her story has never been confined to the past. Instead, it remains a living narrative, constantly evolving, offering valuable insights into leadership, resilience, and the ways in which one individual can leave an indelible mark on the course of history. In reflecting on Cleopatra's legacy, it is essential to consider the ways in which her life has been shaped and reshaped over the centuries. For much of history, Cleopatra was primarily known as a seductress, a queen who used her beauty to charm powerful men. This simplified portrayal has lingered for generations, fueled by ancient Roman writers who sought to reduce her to a mere other in contrast to their dominant masculine society. However, as history has evolved and scholarship has deepened, Cleopatra has become a figure who transcends such narrow definitions. She is remembered not just for her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, but for her intelligence, her political acumen, and her remarkable ability to wield power. Her strategic genius was not limited to securing alliances with Roman generals. Cleopatra's political maneuvering also included her handling of Egypt's internal affairs. When Cleopatra ascended to the throne, Egypt was in a precarious position. Her father, Ptolemy II, had left the kingdom heavily in debt, and Cleopatra had to restore both its economic stability and its political influence. Cleopatra's approach was multifaceted, involving both diplomacy and economic reforms that allowed Egypt to regain its prominence in the Mediterranean. Her involvement in every aspect of Egypt's governance, from military alliances to agricultural policies, ensured her kingdom's survival for a time, even as the Roman Empire threatened to absorb it. One of the most striking aspects of Cleopatra's Reign is the contrast between her public image and the political realities of her time. While she was often portrayed in Roman accounts as a manipulative seductress, in reality, Cleopatra was a deeply educated and politically sophisticated ruler. She was well versed in Greek philosophy, Egyptian religion, and the intricacies of Roman politics. She was one of the few rulers of her time to speak Egyptian, a language that had been reserved for the Egyptian people, thereby earning her respect and legitimacy in her own kingdom. This bilingual ability helped her connect with her subjects while also navigating the complex world of Roman diplomacy. As we examine Cleopatra's decisions, it becomes clear that her alliances with Caesar and Antony were not merely romantic entanglements, but were politically motivated, designed to ensure Egypt's survival. When Caesar came to Egypt in pursuit of Pompey, Cleopatra saw an opportunity to secure her throne. She famously had herself smuggled into Caesar's presence in a carpet, an iconic image that underscores both her audacity and her political savvy. Caesar's backing enabled Cleopatra to solidify her control over Egypt, and the birth of her son Caesarion ensured her future connection to the most powerful man in Rome. Following Caesar's assassination, Cleopatra found herself vulnerable once again. But she was not one to let circumstances dictate her fate. Her next move, forming an alliance with Mark Antony, was a calculated one. Antony, another leading Roman figure, was embroiled in political and military struggles that left him looking for support. In Cleopatra, he found not just a lover, but a powerful ally. Together, they sought to build a new power base that would challenge Octavian's growing dominance. However, the political landscape was shifting rapidly, and despite their efforts, their combined forces were no match for Octavian's strategic prowess. The Battle of Actium marked the turning point, and with their defeat, Cleopatra's kingdom was effectively lost. However, Cleopatra's demise was not merely the end of a political era. It marked the beginning of a different chapter in history. Rome absorbed Egypt as its latest province, but Cleopatra's legacy continued to loom large. In Rome, Cleopatra's image was shaped by Augustus and his propagandists, who sought to discredit her as a foreign temptress whose political maneuvers had endangered the empire. Yet, despite their best efforts, Cleopatra's intelligence and political skill could not be ignored. She was too remarkable a figure to be reduced to mere scandal. In the centuries that followed, Cleopatra's story became a symbol of both romantic tragedy and political resilience. During the Renaissance, artists, playwrights, and scholars began to reimagine her as a complex and tragic figure. The myth of Cleopatra as a woman whose love for Antony led to her downfall became central to her modern portrayal, and this view persisted well into the 20th century. Cleopatra was depicted as a seductress who captured the hearts of two great men of Rome, with her beauty and wit ultimately leading to her demise. But even in this romanticized version, her power and influence remained undeniable. Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra immortalized her as a tragic figure caught between love and ambition. The modern portrayal of Cleopatra has continued to evolve. In films like the 1963 Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, Cleopatra's role as both a lover and a ruler was highlighted, but her character was still often reduced to the image of a glamorous queen. Yet, as contemporary scholarship has uncovered more about Cleopatra's life, a richer, more nuanced picture has emerged. Today we see her as a ruler who fought fiercely for her kingdom, who used intelligence and diplomacy to navigate the complexities of Roman power, and who was ultimately defeated by circumstances beyond her control. Her relationships with Caesar and Antony were politically motivated, not merely emotional. Cleopatra was a queen who saw the wider game, one who understood that survival was never guaranteed and that political alliances were both necessary and precarious. Cleopatra's enduring legacy has made her a figure of inspiration for women in positions of power, offering an example of how one can wield influence and challenge dominant systems. Her life continues to serve as a testament to the power of resilience, strategy, and intelligence, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Her ability to rise, fall, and rise again, using her intellect and political savvy, is a reminder that leadership often involves making difficult choices. And sometimes those choices come at great personal cost. Cleopatra's story reminds us that history is shaped not just by the victors, but by the complex web of relationships, decisions, and actions of individuals who navigate the challenges of their time. She may have been defeated by the might of Rome, but her legacy continues to reverberate through history, reminding us of the complexity of leadership, the power of intellect, and the enduring influence of a woman who shaped the world in her own image.